Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to today's webinar AI powered solo and small law firm practices. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. Over the last few months, one thing has become very clear. AI is no longer just a future conversation for the legal industry, it's already influencing law firms and how they are operating day to day. And to take this discussion forward, I am pleased to introduce our moderator for today's session, Anjali Pawa, our director and operation head for Draft and Craft. Anjali worked closely with law firms globally on legal outsourcing, litigation support, and operational efficiency and workflow optimization. With vast experience supporting firms across multiple practice areas, she brings a practical depth on how legal operations are evolving in the AI plus human era. Anjali, over to you.
Well, thank you, Sagar. Thank you for the warm welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome once again on this webinar on AI-powered solo and small law firms. Again, I'm Anjali Pawa, working with Draft and Craft. We provide dedicated remote paralegals to law firms in the United States. Uh, as you correctly said, Sagar, AI is no longer a thing of the future. It's there right now. And it's a practical tool helping law firms operate faster, better, give a better client experience, and optimize their daily operations. Joining me today are two fantastic practitioners. I have Greg Cragg, Principal Offit Kerman. Hi, Greg. How are you?
Doing very well. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Greg. Greg is a business attorney with over 15 years of experience. He's been advising entrepreneurs, public and private companies across various industries. And with his vast experience, Greg understands what it takes to run legal operations effectively. I have Abhishek Chaudhary as our second panelist with us today. Hi, Abhi.
Hello.
Abhi is the co-founder of ABC Lawyers. He's a new and upcoming lawyer. He is starting his law firm. He's just recently started his law firm, and it's an AI native law firm. And Abhi is, he is going to be bringing in some modern perspectives towards how technology, smarter workflows are reshaping the legal industry today. So, AI works differently for various different types of law firms. Sizes of the law firms do matter. And with the kind of panelists we have today, one from a big law firm, one from a solo law firm, I am excited to know as to how this session is going to shape up and what learnings we're going to get out of it. What are the practical use cases solo and small law firms can actually pick up from here? So we're going to be covering some real opportunities, real wins, and some real risks which are involved when we are working with AI. And I would like to start over here. I was reading a report, which is a Walters Kluwer's report, which says that, interestingly, it says that 90% plus lawyers today are using AI in their everyday work. Yet there's a staggering 60% plus law firms who are still hesitant in actually getting AI into their workflows. They're hesitant, they're unsure. There is still a haze on this matter. Now, we're at the stage where experimentation with AI is done. We are at the stage of early adoption of AI, implementing them into our workflows. Greg, from your vantage at, from an AI, AmLaw 200 law firm, what do you think are the missed opportunities of clients, of law firms who are not adopting AI? Are they missing out on client acquisitions? Are they not working out well in terms of their operations? Or is it something else, or all of these?
Well, they're missing out on two different sides of the operation. One is on the back end, speeding up intake, handling client conflicts, and and making routine matters such as responses to clients much more automated. The other side is the practical side of law, and they're missing out on being able to streamline their research, their drafting, and their response time in their practical applications from day to day.
Right. And how does it work for your firm? Have you adopted AI in totality, or is it something which you're using on an ad hoc basis or a need basis?
Our firm has adopted Copilot, which is Microsoft's solution for its initial foray into AI. We're also working on NetDocs AI, which is a file management platform. And together, those have provided us kind of a foothold in the door. I think over time, we'll start adapting more legal-specific AI products from here.
Right.
But, it's a good place to start just about anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much anything is a good foot in the door. And it's more important to start with baby steps with AI because it can just replace so many different workflows that it can get very overwhelming. So instead of replacing everything that you do all at once, it's better to just take little pieces and say, okay, how can I incorporate this into intake, into my research, into drafting? And then from there, expand on once you feel more comfortable with it.
Right. And I know we're going to be covering quite a bit of this into when we're talking about the risk factor and how we are empowering our paralegals into how they work. But having a proper process, because just giving AI out without any control is going to be risky. And so we'll come to that. But Abby, how have you adopted AI? What's working for you since you've just started out altogether with AI?
Yeah. Well, what I can say about the AI is that so I started my practice last year in September with my sister. There's the two of us, and in the I'd say about 8 months that I've been doing this, I think that the AI has probably made it. This is the easiest time compared to any other time in the past where one can start up a law firm with minimal overhead, so to speak. You can spend 20, $30 for a chat GPT or a Claude subscription and get started from there. And so in our practice, we were always using chat GPT and Claude even before we started our practice. We went through law school during the COVID era. We, have gone to courts afterwards and done our legal proceedings primarily on Zoom. And so technology has always been a focal point of the kind of practice that both my sister and I have engaged in. And so for us, the AI was always like a natural extension of, the work that we were doing. And so, so far in our practice, primarily it's been Claude and ChatGPT. There are lots of, plus points with it. There's also some negatives that I'm sure we'll discuss.
Yeah.
But, and as we're now going through practice, we're now meeting with other vendors to see what kind of technological solutions we can incorporate into our respective practices. But for sure, it's helped us streamline it. In a way, it's almost like as if we have a student in our office, so not another lawyer, but we have like a student that we have to supervise, but that student can do some great work for us. We just have to ask it. And the nice thing is that the student can work for us 24/7 and no questions asked.
True. But there is a question of burnout which happens because the question is that when you're using AI like that, is it actually really is there any meaningful contribution AI is making, or is it actually just adding to the cognitive load where you are prompting, you're reviewing it, you're verifying it? Is it really helping, or is it actually adding to the load?
I think it depends on how you use it. So, and I can only speak to my practice. I use it more as a tool than as a crutch. If you use it as a crutch, I think you will find burnout. We use it as a tool to help us, to expand on our abilities. Yes, there is work for sure. In you're drafting a document, you're going to need, or a pleading, a contract, you're going to draft the AI will help you do the initial draft, and that might save you some time, but you're still going to have to go verify everything. You can't just trust it blindly. You have to read every single word that's put on that page, because at the end of the day, it's going to be your name and your license that's going to be on the line. And so, whether it's burnout or not, I think that, you still have to do the work. And in my experience, it has helped reduce some of that workload. I think compared to when I was working in a law firm before this, where they didn't use AI, where I was doing a lot of the work manually, I would say that this has been a welcome change in pace. And as for burnout, I don't think this would be the source of the burnout if there was to be burnout in my practice, at least.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll jump in on that too. I think that there's definitely the potential impact that, especially for small and solo practitioners, that AI will help eliminate a lot of the burnout, because it automates a lot of the non-lawyer tasks that you would be handling on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Right. So what about client expectations? When we're talking about AI, you have already adopted AI. So how are the clients taking it? Are you openly talking about the use of AI, or are the clients actually being upfront and asking that they want the use of AI? And when the use of AI comes into picture, is there a sense of, a question which is coming related to how the billing is going to be happening? The question of whether the billable hours as to how law firms traditionally charge, is it becoming questionable, or is it going to change over the recent, let's say in the next 5 years, do we see the billable hour still continuing in the way it is right now? Or we're going to be experimenting with new things? How is it going to shape up?
In my own practice, I've noticed a lot more clients who are pushing for caps and flat fee billing on a lot of projects. And sometimes that's realistic, and sometimes it isn't. If you're dealing with something that's routine, that you have a pretty decent idea of how long it's going to take, you're going to be able to hone that in even better with AI, because it's going to be a very repeatable process. But for certain things, litigation cases, you just have no idea how long it's going to take, because it could end the next day, it could end a year from now. So there's not always the ability to be really accurate with some of those predictions. So that, it's still the trend that we have been seeing, a trend towards alternative billing methods besides time and expense. But it's mostly going to be coming from regular clients' businesses.
Yeah.
So, we do read a lot, and we also talk to a lot of people, and it's, there is this thing which is going on where legal law departments within companies explore other options in handling which part to actually give to a law firm and which part to retain in-house. And a large factor over here is being played by AI and ALSPs who are taking up these work. How do you think law firms should be dealing with this scenario?
Sorry, you got cut off there, Anjali. I think I missed that last. Do you mind repeating the question again?
Yes, I was talking about how law departments today are trying to cut their costs. And the way that they're doing is that they are now thinking twice as to which part of the work needs to go to a law firm and which part needs to be handled internally, or maybe outsourcing it to an ALSP in the context of the AI and reducing costs. So how do you deal with such scenarios, especially when law firms who have not yet adopted AI? Let's take that scenario into the picture, because I know we have people who are joining us today who I talked are in that 60% criteria who have not yet adopted AI into their workflows.
There's definitely a lot of uncertainty in the area. People don't know what AI can and can't do. So some people are over optimistic about it and some are under optimistic. but not many people have a realistic idea of what different platforms can offer.
Yeah.
So what you end up seeing is some people who just expect that, oh, I can go and ask ChatGPT to give me a contract that, might have been argued over 25 hours in the past just to get to a final solution. And they say, well, I can skip all that and, just spit out a final form. And it's not like that, because they'll be answering 200 questions to get there.
Yeah.
And a lot of clients don't realize that there's a lot of discretion that lawyers will use, knowing upon the background of the client and their own particular experience, what is the best to use. So it's less, we don't want clients to try to think of it as a top to bottom solution. We want them to think of it as a tool.
Yeah.
So areas where the tools are helpful is where there's a minimum amount of lawyer discretion that's involved. So very routine, small matters, meeting minutes, standard purchase orders. There's a lot of great automation tools out there.
Right.
Ironclad allows you to make contracts that pretty much take legal out of the equation unless there's some very specific requests. And really, that's what we want. We want the interesting lawyer-driven questions to be directed to us, and for the routine matters to be held in-house.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about that as well. My clientele has a little bit smaller clientele. They're not like major corporations, and they are entrepreneurial, younger as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so for them, they see the technology is something like why can't I just use ChatGPT to draft this contract or to make my small claims matter? And what I tell them is that the AI is only as good as the questions being asked of it, right? The AI has all the knowledge there. You just have to ask it. The problem is the average person doesn't have the legal training to be able to identify those issues, which is literally what we're trained to do. Law school, we don't learn the law. We learn how to identify an issue and then create a bespoke solution around that using the discretion. It helps to have experience, but the average person would not be able to appreciate that. And I think to some degree people do appreciate it. That's why lawyers are still in business. But and I think what I'm about to say might answer your previous question. I had a mentor of mine when I was working previously in a law firm, and they told me that lawyers' fees can be boiled down to three factors, right? There's the first factor, which is the time that's going to be expended. Drafting an agreement or drafting a complaint or a pleading, that will take some amount of time. AI is going to do probably a good job of reducing the amount of time that would be needed on those sorts of matters. The second prong of what creates lawyers' fees would be the experience. That's something AI cannot replicate. That's just something that you go through practice, you gain years of experience, and that's what some people are going to be willing to pay a premium for. And then the third factor is the liability. So these AI platforms are not licensed lawyers. They do not pay liability insurance. If you use OpenAI to create a contract, you might get something that approximates what a contract is supposed to say. But in the event you don't, and you find yourself in a dispute, you can't go to OpenAI and say, you led me astray. That's not how it works. But you can with a lawyer, and a lawyer, should have some. At least in Canada, we're supposed to be insured. I know some states I'm also licensed in the state of New York, and I know they don't require insurance there for lawyers. So, but point being is that with a human, you can go after them for the liability, whereas you can't with the AI tools. And so, I think. Your previous question was like, do you see more billing practices changing? I would say I could see it changing, but it's hard to say because you have so many different factors that are going to be playing against each other.
But do you often see that clients do come up and talk about it? Do they try and negotiate on this part?
Yes, I think in my practice, what I've seen is there is definitely a move towards more flat fee billing, at least for the solicitor files that we engage in. The transactional files that we have, there's definitely a push for flatter fees in that regard. Clients want predictability. I think the AI can help get the predictability for it with respect to fees. But again, I think, when you negotiate, at least for our practice, those are the three factors that we negotiate from.
Right.
We got to factor in all of those three factors. So, whereas perhaps if we had done a file on an hourly basis, we might have charged X dollars, but with a flat
Yeah.
fee, we might be charging a little bit more to account for that unpredictability. And then it's up to the client if they want to accept that or not.
Right.
One important thing to
Absolutely.
note about clients mentioning AI is that currently it is kind of becoming an expected thing that lawyers are using AI to some degree, because
Right.
most people are starting to incorporate into their workflows. But not a lot of lawyers are disclosing their use of AI in their engagement letters, which is something else that needs to be considered about how much is required to be disclosed, what are the applicable ethics rulings in your state.
Yes.
Definitely check with the ABA. They have some recent guidance on it. And then just having a basic knowledge, things like what is an LLM? What's the difference between agentic AI and generative AI? And being able to answer, you don't need to know exactly how all these things work, just to have general familiarity with tools that you're using.
Absolutely. This is one thing which I was talking about is it going to be of advantage to the law firms to actually disclose this or keep it under wraps, or whether it's going to be ethically right to do that?
Yeah.
So I guess we'll probably have to see. And I believe that the states are also coming up with their guidance on this, apart from what the ABA rules are talking about. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say,
Sorry,
it's a slow process. I think, for our practice, my sister and I, what we are discussing is that, the rules are responding, and so they're responding to situations that have happened in the past. And so as more test cases come out, we'll get a better idea of what's happening. But the problem is, I can speak for Greg on this, nobody wants to be the test case.
Yeah.
And so that's the unfortunate reality, is that our policymakers are responding, but this is such a new and novel technology. This is the first time in history where human labor is being completely replaced in certain regards, and I don't think we've ever had a solution like that. So the only way we can make policy is until we see it in action.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd say there's we reach back far enough that there are certain things that we could see, like I've spoken with some of the older attorneys at my firm about developments in technology, and some of them remember back to the days when lawyers would write everything by hand, hand it to a secretary, and the secretary would type it all up.
Yeah.
So, we don't have people who are strictly typists anymore. We have assistants who might help with some of that. Some of the older attorneys might still mark up things by hand and have their assistant handle it. But by and large, most attorneys will, by themselves, just go into Word and make their changes.
Yep.
And there's been other similar developments in technology. E-filing instead of mailing it in. Online research instead of going to a legal library. Paperless filing and billing.
Yes.
So this is just, I don't want to say a culmination of a lot of those developments, but it is one of the larger jumps in technology that we've had probably since the introduction of the internet.
Yes.
And as we were talking the other day, 2020 was the biggest push which everybody got in order to move in this direction. I think today, if we are able to use AI effectively, at least those who are able to use it effectively, a lot has to do with the fact that they have already adopted technology. They're already into automations. So the next thing that I want to talk about is how are law firms empowering the backbone of their law firms, which are the set of paralegals and the legal assistants who are handling all the larger part of the grunt of the law firms. Because, for instance, as I was telling, that Draft and Craft, we provide remote paralegals, and we have a process in place. We have AI-powered paralegals as well, but they are not just thrown into the AI. things are, there is a system in which they need to work in. There are processes, there are guidelines that are in place. So how is it working out at your end? I'll take up Greg first because I know you would have a larger set of team and your perspective is going to be quite different to how Abby is handling this.
Right. So whereas at a larger firm, you can have a relatively smaller group, usually one who's more tech savvy, be the pilot for different programs. At a smaller law firm, it's pretty much the whole law firm that's being the test case.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, the best way to go about adopting AI is picking out discrete tasks, small things, baby steps to get into it. Because it's going to be hard to replace top to bottom your whole intake process with an AI solution. It's much easier to do like an AI chatbot or do letter generation by AI or do conflicts checking, something like that, where you can just focus on one thing, learn it, implement it, and then measure it and see, okay, did that save me time over the last month? And then adopting additional steps as you go along.
So I mean, from what I gather, you wouldn't recommend law firms picking up AI from start to end. So there are a lot of platforms who talk about...
Because when you're going in and asking people to learn a totally new system, there's a lot of pushback, and then there's a lot of regression eventually when they say, I can't remember how to do this fifth new task. I'm going to stick with the way that I know how to do it, which is the old way. So, you might be able to implement some of those things top to bottom, and it's generally easier if you're going to bring someone in new who's going to learn all your new systems anyway. On that system. But if you're trying to introduce existing staff, those new procedures, it's a lot to ask for them to completely change all their workflows all at once.
Yeah. But just touching on a little bit of a controversial topic where we are talking about having leaner teams. If a firm is actually adopting something, even if it's in pieces, whether it is from start to end or in pieces, will it eventually lead to reducing the staff which is actually going to be handling this work? Or is it going to help them do more work?
It's ideally going to make them more efficient at the work that they do and automate the tasks that used to be very manual. Yeah. So things like looking up a client's address, filling it into the standard form, using all the standard language, and then plugging in a description of what the matter is going to be.
Right.
So just going through and doing what used to take something like programming language to program a macro to go through and fill all that information in. Now you can just do it with plain language. So it's bringing programmer level power to the average user.
Right. And what about you, Abby? Because you are obviously wearing different hats in your firm.
Yes.
So how is it working for you? What are you doing to ensure that when your team grows, things are already in place?
So I was actually at my previous law firm. I was the go-to guy for the technology to find the different technological solutions and then to test them out, again, a beta test on behalf of the firm. The average age of the partnership at my previous law firm, I believe, was in the early 70s, over the age of 70 for sure. So these guys they had been at it for a long time, and they had one way of doing things, and so I would test out the technologies, and the one thing I saw more frequently than not was that there was a learning curve, but that learning curve is something that with newer people coming into the business, it's something that can be overcome, and that can help improve efficiencies. And that sort of mentality is something that I've brought into my current practice, which is that we build the practice from ground up with technology.
Right.
And to your point about how do we integrate people into that as we grow, so our philosophy is that we will hire people that can do some meaningful work as opposed to just mindless tasks. I don't think anybody likes to do jobs that are boring, dead-end jobs that aren't really contributing much to the greater project. And so that means having assistants and paralegals and junior lawyers that are going to be contributing to the files that they're working on, so that they feel that they're part of the files, that they're part of the firm.
Yeah.
And so, and the technology, I think building the practice up from the ground up with technology in mind, I think can help achieve that. Now, how that would be, it's hard to say because it's still early days, but that's the philosophy behind it.
Right. Now,
I'd also say that
yeah.
age is not a bar. My father just turned 70 this year, and he's about as AI native as they come.
Yes.
So, just because you're no longer a spring chicken, don't feel like this is going to be something that requires learning a programming language. It's a lot of more thinking how to phrase your particular queries than it is about learning how to put the right syntax together.
Yeah.
Right, Greg, and what I can say to that, Greg, is that when I was at my last firm, the senior lawyers, they're the ones, running the file, and they would give me the questions to go ask, and then I would go put it into the AI to figure it out on their behalf. We had a firm, I think we used Lexis when we were there, and so they had an AI tool that they had just rolled out. And it was quite, it was an intuitive program. I think I don't think anybody had a problem using it. But that's how it worked. The hierarchy. So the lawyers at the top, they were still, doing what they always do, which is issue spotting and then delegating the task. And the efficiencies were had by people like myself, and the paralegals were able to go in and spend less time on the assigned task.
Yeah. So what should be focused on there is the part that you're increasing efficiency. You're spending less time on the same project, which frees you up to bring on more cases.
Exactly.
That's kind of the value proposition.
Yeah, exactly.
And then a lot part is going to be enhancing the team's skills as well. The people who are already working in your law firms, their skills need to be enhanced. There needs to be focus on that as well.
Yes.
We talked about client expectations. We've talked about the operational challenges and efficiencies, how they can be met. But a very critical part when we're using AI are the risks and the compliance issues and the client trust issues which are involved over here. There are cases which come out every other day. Some come to everybody's notice, some doesn't. But the fact is, each day we are learning with something new. I caught on to what Abby said, that nobody wants to be a test case, but there are test cases which are there, and we are seeing it. The most recent one, which is in the news and everybody's talking about, is the Sullivan-Cromwell case, because it's not something expected out of such a big law firm. You would think that if they are doing it, they have the processes in place, things are already, good to go. So what does this tell us? And what are the things that we need to take care of while we are incorporating AI into our workflows?
I'd say that there's going to be a major shift in the way that associates are going to be trained over the next few years.
Yeah.
A lot of the tasks that they formerly did top to bottom are now getting automated. Things like research, basic drafting, and they're going to have difficulty in trying to get up to the speed that the partners are. And firms aren't going to want to hire attorneys who aren't coming in. I mean, firms already don't want to hire people who they need to fully train from the ground up, but it's going to be even more difficult to do so once we have AI automating a lot of tasks that they used to. So there's going to have to be a large shift in the way that law firms look at training new associates in light of AI.
And I think with respect to the Sullivan-Cromwell case, I think that that's the age-old problem. There is that at the end of the day, this is just a same problem with in a different context, in that firms have had in the past. You always have to check the work that's being put out, whether it's initially created by your students and by your associates. Right. And I've had senior lawyers that have parsed through every single word I've written down. I think the same philosophy has to apply to whatever an AI puts out as well. And I think perhaps in Sullivan Cromwell's case, they might have taken it for granted that the AI is, better than what they probably had a more optimistic impression of it than what otherwise was the case. But like I said, I think the verify feature is still there. You have to verify everything that you're using with AI.
I mean, this is just one of the case. I mean, it's not the only case. And hallucinations is one issue, and then we have the attorney-client privilege issue, which is also there. That's another point which law firms need to take care of.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the lawyer who's eventually going to be writing up an apology note to the judge for any of the issues that come up. So what should be done to avoid all this? And what are the other things? What are the other factors which are playing out in these cases?
I think that this is where I was saying that I don't know if the policies are in place that can effectively address that, because simply put, it just hasn't been around for long enough. I think there was a case out of New York earlier this year. I think it's Hepburn versus the United States, in which the defendant, before he retained a lawyer, put confidential information with respect to some criminal charges that he was facing. He put that into Claude, and then the federal government subpoenaed those records. And he tried to say that those were privileged, and the judge ultimately said they weren't because, Claude is not a lawyer and that he didn't have a lawyer. And so, on the one hand, it now clarifies that whatever's put into these LLMs, you can request those records, but at the same time, the question that I have is that as a lawyer, if I'm putting information into an LLM, can that also be producible? Because it is technically speaking a third party, but at the same time, if I'm using it in a way that the AI is my agent, so to speak, then does the privilege extend there or not? And I haven't gotten a clear answer. And so my presumption is that it's a third party. You can't put in private information in there, and better to be safe than it is to be sorry. Until and unless the Bar Association or the court say otherwise.
And this is something else that's important to understand, the LLM that you're using. Yeah. And what I mean is, how does it use the information that you're providing to it? Does it retain it? Does it use it for training? And is that particular LLM compliant with your state's ethics guidelines?
Yes.
Because again, ChatGPT, Grok, not Harvey. There's a few other, Claude. They're all public engines, and if you're using the free version, then you can't choose but to have your information essentially disclosed. So you need to make sure that if you are using a paid solution, that it allows you to make sure that any of the inputs that you have remain strictly internal for your business's use and don't get used for training on the general LLM.
But there are a lot of platforms who openly state, even when you're using the paid versions of it, confidentiality is there is still a question mark over there.
Yeah.
Whether you should upload sensitive information while you're checking it, even if it's the paid version.
I think that I think Claude. I don't know about OpenAI, but I know Claude has a feature where you can turn off the sharing. But you're right. Even Claude, makes it clear that they can't guarantee the confidentiality. But part of me, I think, is to avoid getting sued in the future. I think it's a liability, just a blanket liability protection. But you're right. If they can't give you the guarantee, then you're rolling the dice. And so. I hope that in the future that we get some guidance probably sooner rather than later on how to approach that, because the way I see it is like me putting information into an AI, it's no different than it's not all that different from me putting information into a search engine 10 years ago. Google, 20 years ago when Google came on the scene. I'm sure these questions were being asked at that time. To what extent is privacy available? And we've all heard of cases where the government's gone to Google with a search warrant and has gotten records produced. from Google
Yeah.
without any input from the person that was interacting using the Google service and putting that information in. And so, as I've said multiple times now, I want to see more concrete guidelines before I feel comfortable using this tool. And I think, in a way, I think it hinders. I think if we had those guidelines, I think we would be able to use these tools more to their full potential.
And a lot of that's just the function of it being a relatively new technology.
Yes.
The number of AI companies that we currently see are almost certainly going to get winnowed down, as we saw during the dot-com bust in the early 2000s. So right now, what I guess maybe a good metaphor for this would be is that suddenly people who were walking are now given high-powered sports cars,
Yes.
but all the guardrails are getting taken off the roads.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all of a sudden you have a lot more power, but a lot less restrictions. So people need to start agreeing on reasonable use restrictions, things that'll be like limiting the speed of that automobile. But yes, definitely use case scenarios that are approved will be very useful guidance. And right now what we're getting is just piecemeal what not to do. We're seeing all the car crashes, but fewer of the approvals of saying, yes, this is good, safe use of this powerful machine.
Yeah. I think that's and Greg, I would say that that's probably the American way. It's we're averse to having the government coming in and telling us what to do. We'd rather see the accident happen and then bring in the seatbelts and then bring in the airbags and so on and so forth. So I guess perhaps that's just the system that we're in. But I'm sure there's other countries around the world that do things a bit more proactively.
Absolutely.
Great. Those are some really wonderful insights and some practical ways of how we should be adopting AI. Any last takes before we open the floor for questions? Any last takeaways from this? Any specific suggestions as to, from personal use? You talked about that you started to use Copilot, and Abby is, experimenting with Claude, ChatGPT, and everything. But what would be your strong recommendations to attorneys who haven't yet started using it or are still experimenting?
I'd say think about some of your workflows and what takes you the most time, and use those as opening questions to people who know more about AI to recommend you a solution. So, for example, I do a lot of transactional contract draft. One of the things I used to have to do before AI was first I would have to go to precedent contracts, old agreements that I would have, to pull out the language I would want copy pasted over. It's a very time consuming process. Then there's different clause builders that came online, things like Web Insight or a Law Insider, where it would list a bunch of different versions of common different terms. Now I can just click on a button on Copilot that says draft me whatever type of clause, most favored nations, for example, and it'll spit out a standard clause, and then I'll click on refine, and I'll ask it to change the language a bit, and then I'll go through and change some of the terms myself, and it'll go through and it'll actually figure out what are the defined terms here that I need to insert into this clause. So as soon as it comes in, it's perfectly formatted with all your defined clauses, and it saves me a tremendous amount of time. So just think about small bits and then ask those big questions. How can I automate this task to save myself time?
Yeah. And what I would say is, I would say that the free version is available to everyone. I think that if you haven't gotten onto it yet, I think that's probably a good place to start to see how it works. But also to be mindful that there are drawbacks with respect to confidentiality and privacy. But chances are, 9 times out of 10, anybody that goes on these platforms, they see the power of what's capable. What these platforms are capable of, and so I think that's probably how you break into it. That's how I broke into it. And then, my practice is a bit broader. We do commercial and estate law. It's all, transactional and litigation files. And what I will say is that there will be aspects of these jobs that is automated away. But at least from a lawyer's perspective, I don't think, I think the lawyers that are afraid to adopt it are the ones that are afraid that it might take away the job. And to that, I would say is that I think it's the exact opposite. I think that for lawyers, this is the most exciting time because, these tools are, you're not getting rid of lawyers, I don't think, because there's aspects of our job that require us to be human. And so, arguing in front of a judge and a jury or negotiating with the counterparty, that requires you to put on some form of a show. And so, to the people that are afraid to take up the technology because, they're scared that they might be rendered obsolete, I think that's, if once you start using this tool, you will see what it's capable of and you will see what it's not capable of. So that's try it out is what I would say.
Excellent. Yep. Right. I think we are in time and we can open up for some questions. Saban, do we have any questions?
You're muted.
Yes, I'm just trying to get things done. My system doesn't. Any of you want to go ahead and ask any question? Please go ahead and do that. You can type in a Q&A section.
I think there is a question. It's just loading on my screen. Okay, what are your thoughts on how to deal with the LLM context window limitations? Would any one of you would like to take it up? What are your thoughts on how to deal with the LLM context window limitations?
Okay. So that's
I don't understand that question.
Is that with respect to the because I know sometimes if I put a ton of documents into ChatGPT or Claude, sometimes it forgets the earlier documents I put in. Is that what you're referring to with them?
I am not too sure. Vadim Nebushin is the attendee who's asked this question. Vadim, would you want to unmute yourself and Sagar, can we unmute him and probably get the question and clarity?
They're talking about how many tokens, input, output, and history can be used at once, essentially the short-term memory of an LLM. And really, that's just going to be something that gets built over time. Especially people are starting to build their own AI models at home, and they'll be able to just reference certain files and certain information. So they'll build essentially their own backend databases of their own information so that they can just reference, look at my standard forms file to pull out the contract that I like, use the terms that we used during the ABC Corp deal, and just incorporating things by reference. But, part of that is just a limitation on the software currently. Yeah. And as you build, it's going to be, the power is going to get stronger. But another important thing is figuring out how to efficiently use your tokens, because the more that you use the tokens, the more it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, one is obviously the software is going to get better. These algorithms are going to become more efficient in how they use their compute power. And at the same time, I know around the world, they're building more data centers to be able to do those sorts of computations. And, over time, you will be able to have a larger and larger context window with respect to, the work that, you're putting into the AI and getting outputs. I think for the time being, the way we've been handling that is that, that I might have a project that I create in my ChatGPT or my Claude, and I'll dump a bunch of documents and I'll say that these are the documents that I want you to refer to. And, as the chat goes on, these chats can get very long. And so if I need to come back to it later, I might just drop the specific document that I'm referring to and drop that in there. I think that's one way around it. I mean, it's more of a bootstrapping solution, but, that's what's worked for us. And I'm hoping that in the future that, as Greg is saying, that we can just set up a server and then have that feeding into the LLM.
Okay. I have another question which says most AI discussions in legal focus on efficiency gains. But for solo and small law firms, do you think the bigger opportunity is actually in creating entirely new new service models and client experiences that larger firms may struggle to adopt quickly? I think we can have both your perspectives on that.
Good question. Okay, so I think what I was saying at the beginning of this talk was that, first of all, I think, with respect to solo and small law firms, I think this is probably the best time than ever before to be able to do that sort of venture, because, you have, a $20, $30 AI subscription that can help at least, get you started. You don't need a big capital investment up front. I think you will start to see more solo and small law firms pop up around the country. With respect to new service models, I don't know how effective they would be right now, only because, lawyers, bar associations are run by people and they regulate what a lawyer can and cannot do. And, I think there's been some reluctance in allocating those privileges of being a lawyer to these companies. I think what instead you will see, or you're going to see more companies that provide a service that lawyers would use in their respective practices. And I know for example, one we were looking into something called Opera. It's in Canada. They do corporate software, but they don't actually, they basically work as agents for the lawyer as opposed to doing the actual incorporation, minute book management, and what have you. I think you will start to see more companies like that. I think the competition in that space is going to get quite fierce because the barrier to entry even for startups in the legal tech space has come down significantly since 2020, and AI has made that even more accessible to more. So you'll with respect to new service models and startups in that space, I think you will see a lot more competition. And as for the larger firms, I don't see them struggling all that much going forward. Maybe Greg might have a different opinion, but larger law firms have larger clients, and those larger clients still value that human touch that comes with having a lawyer. And like I said earlier, a big part of what lawyers do is that we have to put on a show, so to speak, right? Like when you argue in front of a judge or a jury, you have to convince them. It's a human being that you have to convince. Or if you're negotiating with a counterparty to a contract, you have to convince a human being, and so that requires a human in the driver's seat, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think whichever service can help the lawyer do their job better, I think those are going to be the winners going forward.
I think that there is a valid point here, kind of buried in the assumption that prior technologies have always been more quickly adopted by smaller firms because they're smaller, they can pivot faster, and they've been the ones who have led a lot of these the leaps forward. But there's been, I think, a little bit too much of a hang up on like, oh, I'm going to have to replace everything and AI is going to replace me, and these in these fears. And instead of being early adopters, a lot of smaller law firms are shying away from it and waiting to see what everyone else does. But I think that they're quickly going to be left behind by other firms that are able to do things cheaper and faster with more efficiency. But as far as new service models and client experiences, like Abhi said, there is definitely an issue that we are limited by what the laws say that we can do as lawyers. But there are also other related things in JD adjacent fields. I think that we might start seeing a proliferation of new positions who offer some sort of consulting services on in-house legal tech, and that you might have smaller firms come in and essentially build out an in-house legal platform that they're essentially acting as a service provider towards. Or we might see people who start changing their pricing models to be something more like an LLM would offer, that you buy tokens. And, depending upon what type of if it's just one of the routine things that your firm would handle, then they're just essentially buying your time through those tokens.
I do have one quick question, although we did take it up, but if you want to add more to this, what about the concerns in respect to the accuracy of AI, which still lacks the precision and cannot be relied on completely? Along with that, most importantly, what about the security of confidential documents of the clients? Anything you would like to add? Because we did, talk about it. We talked about the confidentiality aspects over here, and it's all
I'd
about
say
using
that
things.
there's a few different things to keep in mind. I mean, obviously, garbage in, garbage out. If you feed bad information or a bad prompt, you're not going to get the result you want.
Yeah.
The other thing is, as has previously been noted, there are AI hallucinations. But I'd
Yep.
say that if you're having work done by just a human paralegal or assistant, you're going to have the same issues, that you have to have oversight over those people and be able
Correct,
to
yeah.
spot and say, hey, there's an issue here. This isn't the document that should be sent out. It's a different one. Or there's a citation here that doesn't exist. It's been hallucinated. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes you might get an associate who, miscited a case. And I think it's essentially the same thing. You just need to be able to exercise oversight, not get hung up on AI being able to do everything, and just assume that it's a tool
Right.
and not total solution.
Yeah. And with respect to the security, I think that there is a risk that that confidentiality could be an issue going forward. I think the only way you can deal with that now is to be careful with what you put in, sanitize the documents, take out identifying information. That's probably the best thing you can do at this point. And hopefully going forward, we get more guidance around that.
Right. Using it responsibly is
Yes.
what's going to matter right now. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
That's
Internal policies that are framed after the applicable ethics rulings are going
Yes.
to be important. And a lot of firms that do have AI usage almost always adopt an AI usage policy, which should be important for anyone's firm so that they know what the AI can and cannot be used for. And sometimes you might need to discuss that in conjunction with your malpractice carrier and figure out what are their limitations, so that if you're doing something that's outside of the scope of your malpractice care coverage, then they're not going to cover it. And you have to assume that they're still figuring out a lot of the stuff at the same time that we are. And it's
Yes.
going to be much better to, instead of looking for coverage that covers a lot, just start in having those internal mechanisms that that limit your own liability internally.
Yeah.
Okay, we have reached the end. So I would just like to take a moment to thank you both for this wonderful session. I think we've got some great insights, and I look forward to more such sessions with you.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you,
us.
Greg. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I will be uploading the recording on our social media, on our website, and we'll be sharing over the email as well. And if there will be any question left, we can go ahead and you guys can send it, and I can share it with both of the speaker, and we will take that forward. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
joining.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.